Hello and welcome to Press TV News Analysis. I'm Kaveh Takvai. It's the largest assault on the Gaza Strip by Israel since the war at the turn of 2009. As of now, 27 Palestinians killed, hundreds injured, mainly civilians. Israel has suffered 3 civilian casualties, with 4 others injured, including 3 soldiers. These numbers could rise even higher. Yet what is different this time around is that the Gaza Strip has responded firmer, and by some accounts, Israel has underestimated their force. Take, for example, missiles to have reached Tel Aviv, the first time in 6 decades that Palestinians have been able to do so, or the sheer number of overall firepower from the Gaza Strip, outnumbering Israel's air assaults. In this news analysis, we will look at that closely and what political answers lie for the conflict, along with regional implications. Let me introduce our guest. Activist and filmmaker Harry Fear joins us from the Gaza Strip. And we have from the International Action Center, Sarah Flounder joining us from New York. And joining us from London, we have author and political analyst Carol Gould. I'd like to welcome all our guests. Let me first set the tone with our guest from Gaza, Harry Fear. Harry Fear, as a filmmaker, not to mention as an activist, obviously you're witnessing things. Why don't you set the tone for this program and tell us what is occurring there in the Gaza Strip?
What's occurring in the Gaza Strip is what Palestinians are calling a massacre. We're seeing the killing of pregnant women, elderly men, and children. It's a very, very grave situation here in Gaza, with practically every part of the Gaza Strip receiving either Israeli airstrikes or naval shelling. We're seeing tanks amassing on the border. And we must remember that this is a third world, largely defenseless population of 1.5 to 1.7 million people here in Gaza, in a tiny area the size of Washington, D.C. or the British Isle of Wight. So we're seeing a real use of reckless, disproportionate violence inflicted on the Gazan population in these last hours and days.
Carol Gould, does that justify Israel in terms of what our guest there, Harry Fear, said is going on in the Gaza Strip?
I can't hear you. I didn't know what you asked me.
I'm asking whether Israel's use of force on the Gaza Strip justifies what is going on, which is based on what Israel says in response to rockets and missiles coming from the Gaza Strip.
Well, there have been over 350 rockets coming into Israel over the past 2 days. I can't imagine Prime Minister Cameron allowing 350 rockets to come into London or Glasgow and not retaliate in some way. However, you have to remember also that Netanyahu's government is a right-wing, warlike government. It's the kind of government that is going to be aggressive. And if Israel had a Labour government and a government that was more interested in negotiation and in standing back and referring to the UN, then we wouldn't have this escalating violence. So that is something that's very important for your viewers to understand, is that when you have a right-wing Likud government, this is what you're going to get.
Well, Sarah Flounders, this time around, it seems like there's many things that are different. And I'm talking about different than what happened back in 2008 and then overall in a bigger picture. One of them is the fact that missiles have been used hitting Tel Aviv. And this is the first time in 6 decades that Palestinians have been able to do so. I'm wondering, and also the reports of downing of a F-16 jet. I'm curious if this is something that Netanyahu actually thought of, or did Israel underestimate the firepower coming from the Gaza Strip?
Well, Israel may have underestimated, because they have struck the Palestinians with impunity time and time and time again for 6 decades. They just assumed they could do this endlessly. And it's very significant that the Palestinians this time, although with far less firepower and far less precision, but nevertheless, the fact that they were able to respond, and missiles were able to even reach Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and shots at U.S.-supplied Israeli aircraft. This is a new day, a very important development, and it does show that the determination of the Palestinian people, the people of Gaza, to defend themselves has been able to make some impact, and it will change the calculation, because in Israel, as long as they could attack the Palestinians at no cost to themselves, they were more than willing to continue this criminal conduct. But like with any bully, if you can have any ability to respond, then it is a new day, a new development. I just want to say this is a really important time for the people of the world to stand up and say the Palestinian people have a right to resist, to fire rockets, to dig tunnels, and to defend themselves.
Well, that's an important point. Let's expand on that a little bit more, Harry Fear. You know, last time the war, Operation Cast Lead, 1,400 killed Palestinians, many civilians to have been part of that, not to mention women and children. Palestinians felt abandoned. And I remember clearly when that war was going on, reporting on that. But this time around, a little different. We have the Prime Minister of Egypt coming through, Tunisian Prime Minister tomorrow. We also have had reports that from the spokesperson of Ban Ki-moon that he's going to visit Gaza, not to mention a delegation to arrive from Egypt there again. This time around, Palestinians hopefully have this increase in spirits, at least, because it seems like, out of the 27 killed, we have about 300 injured, so they don't feel abandoned. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct, and there is international and local reinforcement of that support of the Gazan population, because we're seeing not only Tunisia, as you say, the Ban Ki-moon are coming as well, the Iranian foreign minister is due to come, so we're seeing, and Egyptian obviously most prominently, we are seeing international support, if you like, warming towards the grief of the Palestinian people in these days. At the same time, though, we're seeing a very interesting development, which is a clear differentiator between this Operation Pillar of Cloud and Operation Cast Lead being inflicted on the Palestinians. Because this time, we're hearing the Palestinian people saying, for really the first time in the last decade, that they feel they have their own defense force. They feel like they have some sort of force which is fighting off Israeli military aggression. And so with these attacks on Israel, with these missiles, etc., we're hearing Gazan people here who I've spoken to saying, we feel Israel is being repelled and we are now being protected by these retaliatory strikes on Israel.
Well, Carol Gould, if you can give us perhaps what is in the big picture here. Some analysis, if you have me, Carol Gould, some analysis being that, as for the voting to take place for Prime Minister Netanyahu, that he wanted to show the power of Israel. But when we look at the regional landscape, what are the goals that Israel is after, aside from obviously them responding to rocket fire and missiles coming from the Gaza Strip? I mean, is there a bigger picture involved that we should be looking at?
There ought to be a bigger picture by tonight. What surprises me is that there has been no statement from the United States, no statement from Obama or Hillary Clinton or from the EU. This seems to be an event that perhaps has even taken the White House by surprise. It would be nice to know that there is some effort being made by the powers, the US, Britain, or Europe, to stop the violence on both sides. There is no point in this violence. There is no point in people being killed on either side. There is no point in this becoming a protracted war that could develop into a land war, an invasion by Israel, particularly as there is so much trouble in surrounding countries. We've heard that King Abdullah has canceled his trip to the United Kingdom because he's having problems at home in Jordan. Obviously, we all know there are problems in Syria. So when you mention the bigger picture, to me, the bigger picture means that somebody has got to step in and make a stand and stop the violence on both sides. The rockets coming into Israel, that is also wrong. It should not be happening. Gaza was a flourishing community before Ariel Sharon evacuated all the Jewish settlers from Gaza in 2005. There were greenhouses, schools, there was a hospital, there were agricultural businesses, organizations, and now Hamas is using it as a military base to shoot rockets. It could be a flourishing agricultural, industrial area of the Palestinian community. So there are wrong things stupid things being done on both sides. Violence begets violence, and there is no point in it. And I would like to see President Obama or Prime Minister Cameron or the United Nations or some leaders somewhere to say this has to stop and to find some way of bringing the two sides back to the table and for peace to come to the region.
Well, that's interesting. Let us look at that, Sarah Flounder, in terms of what our guest Carol Gould said about Barack Obama. I mean, aside from the fact that for the past 4 years, it seems like this has been derogated down as a low priority in terms of the tasks that he has to do in the Middle East. He has come out, the most recent being asking Turkey and Egypt to stop the rockets coming from the Gaza Strip. But then here we have Turkey, who has blamed squarely this conflict on Israel, which is interesting. Not to mention that, well, Qatar has also said that Israel shouldn't go unpunished. What posturing should we expect from the United States? Why have they taken right now this route of pressuring Turkey and Egypt to somewhat solve what is going on?
Well, it's important to recognize that Israel consulted, and there was a briefing on Monday, the day before the attacks, with the White House. So it's not that the U.S. did not have foreknowledge of this. And it's also always important to recognize and state again and again that these attacks would end immediately if the U.S. in any way, if the White House in any way announced that they were going to cut off even a penny of U.S. aid to Israel. Instead, there was a Pentagon announcement that Israel is their partner. Now, that means a promise to resupply and re-up the aid to Israel. Anything they expend in this attack will be returned to them and more. This attack really is a U.S.-Israeli attack. And it would stop with any action of the U.S. in the UN, in military aid, in economic aid, in any form of measure from the White House. It has continued through every administration. And we also, just in terms of the previous speaker saying, who destroyed the agriculture infrastructure that had been left when the Israeli settlers pulled out? It was Israel that went in and bombed and destroyed that, and they laid waste to those very facilities 4 years ago and had earlier bombed it. So to blame the Palestinians for in any way damaging agriculture in Gaza, that has not happened. This is really, we need to be one-sided to focus who's really to blame in this long struggle. It continues with the full support from Washington, and it has continued in Israel also, regardless of what administration is in office.
Well, Harry Fear, that is one problem that is not being reported when this situation is unfolded in the media through mainly through the Western TV stations as it's broadcasting to their people, and that is the fact that it's not showing both sides of the story. For example, we can't forget, as you very well are looking firsthand, of how this 1.5 million Palestinians are being choked in terms of their livelihood, and how through basic meticulous control of the Strip, Israel has been able to blockade this 5 years on, going on to the 6th year. That is something that doesn't get reported on. And perhaps that needs to be put into context of what is going on when you have these Palestinians being choked and a government that wasn't even allowed to rule Hamas, a democratically elected government. Isn't that why Palestinians are behind Hamas?
Well, yes, in 2006, Hamas was democratically elected, and so it has a large, broad, popular mandate here. And Palestinians see that although this mandate is now 6 years old, that it still has legitimacy and weight behind it. Let me just add very quickly that while your other guests were talking, 4 airstrikes have been struck around this area in central Gaza City, including one which opened the door of the studio in which I'm talking to you in. And so these airstrikes come in the context of, as you say, a besiegement policy of the Gaza Strip, which has severely affected affected the economy, basically totally suffocating it. So that youth unemployment is 75%, adult unemployment is over 50%, that more than 60% of the population are reliant on aid agencies just for food to survive. That is the background situation as a result of the medieval siege that Israel imposed as collective punishment on the people of Gaza.
Carol Gould, there's a new landscape, though, and we have a new president in Egypt, Mohamed Morsi. Do you think that, based on some accounts, that this could be a turning point and for Morsi to shine and abide by the pledges that he has made? And of course, we know that Hamas was formed out of Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood. And we've seen the two most recent developments, the visit of the Prime Minister and what's going to go on tomorrow, a delegation of Egyptian officials to visit the Gaza Strip.
Well, it was just said by one of your distinguished guests that Gaza is under siege, that people are suffering, there's 75% youth unemployment. I have been saying on this television network for 4 years that the biggest problem in that part of the world is lack of leadership. And I have said over and over again, they need an Abraham Lincoln, a Franklin Roosevelt, a Martin Luther King, a John F. Kennedy, somebody outstanding, extraordinary, to lead them out of the problems that with which they seem to be besieged. And I'm not just going to, we can't just always blame Israel, because look at the way Japan and Germany came out of the ruins of the war and became two world powers. Then they're never going to get anywhere shooting rockets into Israel. You just aren't going to get anywhere. You're not going to get kids back to work by shooting rockets into Israel. I'm hoping that Mr. Morsi from Egypt will come to the region and will shine. And as you say, perhaps he will show great leadership, he will bring an end to the violence, and he will show, he will be an influence on whoever the leaders are in Gaza, because at the moment, I don't think they have good leadership. All they are doing is creating violence and sending endless ordnance into Israel. It's not achieving anything. But if Mr. Morsi and the delegation from Egypt can stop the violence on both sides and bring some degree of renewal and prosperity to Gaza and to the Palestinian areas, then he will be one of the great leaders of his people, of the people of the region. And that is what he must strive to do, not encourage violence.
Sarah Flounder, it is nighttime in Gaza right now. There are reports that roads leading to the Gaza Strip have been closed by Israel, reserves up to 100,000 plus, and a ground invasion is imminent. Maybe by tomorrow, hypothetically speaking, if we're going to see a slaughter take place in the Gaza Strip, then things might turn. The next 24 hours is really important, and actors need to come together. The Emergency League, the Arab League is going to be having an emergency meeting. What do you see coming out of that? Are we going to see more action from Arab countries regarding what is going on?
I certainly think so, and I certainly hope so, because it is up to, it's very important what Egypt does at this moment. By the way, it's also important the huge demonstrations taking place in Jordan. It's important to recognize, by the way, that Gaza, there is a democratically elected government. Whether the previous speaker agrees with that fact or not, that is reality. The people of Gaza stand with their elected government. Now, I've traveled to Gaza several times under the blockade. I saw bombing happens on a day-to-day basis from Israel. Of course, this is a real all-out onslaught, such as we saw 4 years ago. I think the danger of a ground invasion, what that will mean for the people of Gaza, is certainly, the consequences would be absolutely horrendous. But I also think, as these rockets have shown, the people of Gaza will resist. And they have although limited, they have some means to resist. I think this is an urgent time for people around the world to be in the streets and demonstrations, to those leaders who reflect the will of their people, and I certainly hope that a significant Egyptian delegation can send a strong message that many actions from Egypt and throughout the region, this is a time to stand with the Palestinian people, because in a real way, why does the U.S. support this attack from Israel? Because they want to crush every example of resistance. They want to crush in hammering the Palestinian people. They're sending a global message. So standing up to that message in every way, this is the time to do so. And I would hope that also the Arab League and all different organizations speak with one voice at this time.
And Harry Fear, a message that you want to send since you're in Gaza as an activist and as a filmmaker.
The message I want to send to people is very clear, that every single person has a responsibility of some size towards the Gazan people as fellow human beings who can witness the insanity of Israeli violence being inflicted on this third world population here, who are largely defenseless, as I said before. Everyone needs to contact their democratically elected representatives to put pressure on them, to put pressure on their governments, to put pressure on the Israeli government to back off this assault on the Gaza Strip.
Thank you very much. Activist and filmmaker there, Harry Fear from Gaza. Also like to thank author and political analyst Carol Gould from London, and from the International Action Center, Sarah Flounder. Thank you. Give her statements from New York. And thank you for watching another edition of the Press TV News Analysis. Do send us any comments you may have. Newsroom@presstv.ir is our email address. From me, Kaveh Tahwai, and the entire team here in the capital, Tehran, it's goodbye.